With me today is John from AARP. Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you much, Senator, for having us.
One of our largest and growing populations in Connecticut is our senior population, and you do such a wonderful job protecting them. Do you know what the percentages are in the aging population in Connecticut?
Well, I know the aging population in Connecticut is growing. I know that we have, just to give you a good example of AARP members, I mean, we have 600,000 members that are age 50 and older. That's a growing population. So over the age of 65, I think there's at least 16% of the overall population. So it's a growing population. It's an aging population, and it's one that certainly has to be paid attention to.
Well, aging, but certainly healthy, because we are living longer.
Sure.
It's not like, back when my mom or when my grandmother was considered
Sure.
a senior. I remember it so much differently than it is today. People are still working until later. They're very busy. They are living in their own homes for much longer than they used to, and that's a great thing. And those are sort of some of the public policy agendas that are put out there. And Senate Democrats, myself and my colleagues, are working with and joining with AARP to protect seniors in Connecticut and provide some good policy moves this year.
Absolutely, Senator. Senator Osten, you were with AARP a little time ago at a press conference announcing some really great agenda items to help people age in their homes, provide them the tools and resources they need to be able to do that, provide the laws out there that will help protect them from a lot of the unscrupulous practices that prevent people from living successfully in their home, particularly as they age. So I want to thank you for that, and we could talk a little bit about some of those issues.
Sure. Some of the things that we were looking at was reemployment of older workers. Yes. I think that's very important because people aren't necessarily ready to retire and stay home. They want to be busy, want to make themselves feel useful, and a job is one of the things that sort of defines us, if you wanted to talk about
absolutely,
that.
Senator Osten, and we want to thank you for raising legislation to actually deal with the unemployment situation in Connecticut, but specifically the unemployment situation for people who are age 50 and older. Because, as you get older and you become unemployed, you tend to be unemployed even longer than a younger worker. And in fact, there's a crisis that, is the unemployed need not apply rule, right? So what your legislation does, and we're grateful for, will try to take away that discrimination against the older worker and the unemployed who are trying to find work. And frankly, there are people in their 60s that want to or need to still work.
Exactly.
And so legislation that you put forward is really trying to drill down and get to that, and we are glad to be working with you on it.
Thank you very much. I really thought that was one of the, a very important thing for us to raise. We really want people to have an opportunity to be as successful and not, and you're absolutely correct. Some people still need to work much beyond what was the traditional early
Sure.
60s of age when they could stay home. And another thing is I find that a lot of people define themselves by having a job, and they want to be able to go someplace during the day, and that's also equally as important to feel like you're part of the community. Yes. And a job does do that.
Well, and Senator, we have so many AARP volunteers that are, in their 50s, in their 60s, who are actually looking for work. So it's not that people are lazy because they're doing something productive with their lives, because they're having difficulty because of the barriers that are up for them.
Right.
To gain employment, that they actually are some of the people that have testified in favor of this legislation because they know it's going to help them, remain productive, and also, help them meet and make ends meet, because that's, it's a difficult time, and people need to work a lot of times, as you said, well into their 60s.
Well, I remember my mom, we had a family business, my mom didn't retire from the family business until much later, and said to me one day, she said, and she lives on Social Security, she said, I should have done a better job saving, and feels that, sometimes she's, cramped in her style of being able to do things that she wants to for her children and her great-grandchildren. Sure. I told her, I said, now it's our time to help you out, Mom, but you raised 7 kids. But there are a lot of people that need to have a salary coming in, that need to earn money to make ends meet. Connecticut's an expensive state. Our electric bills are higher than some other areas, and in line with that, we're looking at electric suppliers. That seems to be an issue that we have to address.
Senator, it is a huge issue. It was an issue before. It's really an explosive issue now. So many suppliers have kind of snookered people into variable rates, either through slamming, through misrepresentation. And so people are finding these bills that are doubling and tripling every month, not because of expenses going up for the companies, just because they've gotten people into a variable rate unknowingly. And so, Senate Democrats and yourself have put forward legislation that will try to kind of hone in on some of the abusive practices that these companies are putting forward, like making sure that on your bill you know what the standard state rate is versus the third-party supplier rate, so that you will know every month whether or not you're actually getting a good deal. So that's one of the things that we're very, very pleased with, because it's really taking people by storm. And when you're living in these hard times on limited dollars, you can't afford to have them thrown away on something like misrepresentation by a utility company.
Exactly. And one of the things that it's very hard to get in touch with these third-party suppliers. They often don't answer their phones, or they keep you on hold for a long period of time, or for extensive periods of time, sometimes up to 2 and 3 hours. People are trying to get through to somebody to find out what's going on, and without the correct information. And it's complicated when you get these deals in the mail, and seniors tend to be the population that people target because they are trying to save money. They're trying to be frugal. When they get a good deal and they find out that it's not something that's worthwhile, it's very difficult.
That's right, Senator. And so many of these things are happening because they have door-to-door salesmen that are coming to your door, and they prey on the houses of seniors, and they really just kind of fast talk them into it, and sometimes really do things like, can I see your bill, or can you share your account number? And before you know it, they've been slammed into a third-party supply. So the legislation that you're putting forward with your colleagues will really try to limit the abusive practices of door-to-door sales, and kind of these do not call registry violations. We had somebody testifying the other day that I got snookered by a third-party electric supplier, and I'm on the phone, and I'm on a do not call list.
Right.
It's utterly amazing. But we're hopeful that when we rein in some of the practices of violations of the do not call list, things that you're putting forward, we restrict some of the abusive practices on door-to-door sales, and then really put into perspective in a clear way, what the proper way to enter into a contract is, and knowing what the rates are. All legislation that you're putting forward, that will help people, if they choose to go into the market, make an educated decision.
Exactly. And I think that that's something that is so important today. One of the other pieces of legislation that we're working on is that it's always good to improve on the aging in place.
Absolutely.
And people are more comfortable being in their own homes. They actually are healthier in their own homes. They are still able to, again, be part of that community. So we continue to push forward with efforts on that along with you. Yeah,
there's an aging in place, a lot of support for aging in place, both that yourself and colleagues are putting forward, and frankly in the governor's budget, that will actually help us further the aim of keeping people living at home. I for one know firsthand, because my mother took advantage of the Connecticut home care program and was able to stay at home, as opposed to, had Alzheimer's, as opposed to getting in a nursing home. And I have to say, she was able to get adult daycare and all of the things that allowed her to stay home and give her a quality of life, as opposed to an institutional care, which was not what she wanted.
Right.
So this legislation that you all are putting forward is going to really help provide the resources and the tools that people will need to be able to continue to stay in home, if in fact they're able to. Right. That's the objective, right? I mean, not everybody can stay at home, but if you're able to, you should be able to.
Right, and I agree, and it's just about actually honoring people who have given so much to our society already. They've already participated. raised their families, and it's now time for us to make sure that they're as comfortable and safe as possible. And that's really what the goal is today, is to make sure that we're providing them the information they need to make good choices, honest choices, and that they can stay home when it's safe for them to stay home, and that we're providing them with the ability to to not be harassed by sort of the snake oil salesmen of the world.
That's absolutely right, Senator. I mean, we've had people testify. I mean, literally a gentleman saying he was a rocket scientist, literally, and that he was snookered.
Right.
And he couldn't believe, when he sat back and said, geez, I came to my door. I can't believe I allowed this to happen to me, but
Right.
that's how good they are, because there's a lot of money in deception, and it's our goal to really weed that out so that people do have the tools to be able to live home.
Exactly. I just want to thank you though for Connecticut AARP for always looking out for seniors. It's such an important task, and I think that for a long time people thought that would just happen naturally. But you have always been on the on the front lines of putting out good policies and making sure that and protecting bad policies from being instituted. And really, it's an honor to work with you on these issues. I'm so excited.
Well, we're so happy. You've been such a great addition to the Senate, Senator Osten, and one of the first groups I know you met with before you even took office after you were elected was AARP down in Norwich, I believe it was, and so we're
Otis
really
Library.
you got it, and you've been working very closely with us over the last year and a half, and I know we're going to be able to continue to do that as we move on the rest of this session.
Well, I'm happy to be on the Aging Committee now. I plan on making these my, some of my #1 issues. This is the end of this segment. Always more to talk about on Coffee with Cathy, and we'll be back in a few minutes with another guest. But thank you so much, John.
Thank you, Senator. We're back with Coffee with Cathy, and with me now is Lori Pelletier. I have to say congratulations.
Thank you.
Your election as running the AFL-CIO in Connecticut was so well deserved. You've always been a champion for workers in Connecticut and workers in this country, and I have long admired everything you've done for workers. I want to thank you for everything that you've done.
Oh, Cathy, thank you so much. And again, I could say that right back at you, because you too have been a leading voice for not only workers, but women in particular. So thank you for that.
So now we get to work together now.
Yeah,
two women leaders that get to work together on some issues. And we have some big issues this year in the Labor Committee. Last year we passed minimum wage, and who would have ever thought that we'd be back again this year?
Right.
Eventually I'd really like to look at using the Consumer Price Index to index minimum wage, so we don't have to have this conversation year after year. But I'm happy to have the minimum wage in front of us again. That's something that you've long supported, and if you wanted to speak on that.
Yeah, I mean, who'd have thought, when we had our we had our convention last September, we talked a lot about income inequality. And here we are, where that's the sort of the words that everyone's saying today. And in particular, minimum wage, I mean, it doesn't matter what party you're from. It polls incredibly high because people realize that even at $10.10, how do you raise a family on basically $400 if you're able to get full-time?
Right.
$400 a week.
And that's really the issue. And even having this discussion, companies across the United States are now starting to bring up their workers to a 10-10 wage. I believe it was the Gap the other day that has decided to bring their workers up. So having the discussion is starting. It's not just something that is being done by policymakers, with collective bargaining, with workers. It's also being done by people who run good businesses and are looking at things.
It's again, 100 years ago, or maybe not that long ago, Henry Ford realized that in order to have his employees be a consumer base, he had to pay them a good wage. And in our economy, in our capitalist economy, it's consumer driven. So if you pay someone $10.10 versus $8.75, that difference of $1.35 is going to go right back into the economy. It's not going to go in a hedge fund. It's not going to go offshore. It's not going to buy art. It's going to go right back into the local economy, and that's incredibly important.
Right. It's going to pay for fuel. It's going to pay for rent. It's going to pay for groceries, and it's going to buy clothes or shoes for their family.
Right.
That's exactly where it goes. It goes right back into local businesses. We have another big issue in front of us this year, and that's we're working on a retirement bill to provide a retirement savings account for workers who have no other pension. And I'm really excited about that piece of legislation.
Again, it's, last year you had a hearing on it. The President of the United States stole your idea, spoke about it at the State of the Union, and now here we are, with some movement here on the state. Again, the idea that, and this just continues to stun me, that 1 out of every 4 seniors in Connecticut, not Mississippi, Connecticut, live in poverty. And if we're going to have a workforce that has changed and no longer you spend 25 or 30 years with one employer, that you do move around, the ability to be able to put some money into an account that is well managed and know that you have that security no matter where you go to work is really ahead of its time. And again, kudos to you and Representative Terziak and the rest of the Labor Committee for having this bill.
Well, I think it's really exciting, and I think that we should explain to people that this is money that would be employee-based. It's not the employer does not have to contribute any money. Of course, we would accept it if they did. It would be managed by the treasurer, and she's done a great job on Connecticut's investments. It doesn't. It's an opt-out program, so people will be opted in. They'd have to affirmatively opt out and not be part of it. We will have a public hearing on it pretty soon, sometime in the next 3 or 4 weeks. So I'm excited about it. I think it'll be great.
It's a great piece of legislation. What we've seen over the course of the last 30 years is the defined benefit pension plans are going away, and employers are doing more with 401ks, and that's fine, except for the fact that if you move between employer, then you go through the whole hassle of rolling over. But there's also the fees that are part of that, and so having the state treasurer, I mean, our current state treasurer has done a wonderful job with investments, gotten 13% 2 years ago, 15% last year return on our investments. And being able to utilize that strength is really, again, an important thing for working families.
So I can't wait to see. We have to go through the process, but it's a good move to have this
Absolutely.
bill completely drafted and ready to go and have a public hearing on it, and let's move that process forward. I have a favorite bill. I worked on it last year, and it's actually one of my biggest issues that I have, and that's the result of having workers' compensation help workers who have a mental health issue as a result of an incident that they observed, much akin to what happened down at Sandy Hook. And I think that we have to start recognizing in all instances, not just in workers' compensation, but also just regularly, that we have this organ called the brain, and it's part of the body, and we cannot any longer afford to ignore it, and we do so at our own peril. So I'm really excited to put forth some workers' compensation legislation that would provide workers' compensation for someone who receives a stress-related issue as a result of seeing another human being kill or maim somebody.
Again, in 1993, when the workers' comp system was just slashed with no rhyme or reason, just cut for the sake of cut, mental health was left out. And again, you're absolutely right. The idea, it's a different workplace today. Again, 100 years ago when workers' comp was started, it was, fingers and hands and arms being mutilated. Well, to some extent, the mental health issue is we are mutilating our heads about, these terrible instances. And it's as widely known as Sandy Hook was, every day there's other things that go on. I mean, we saw just a few days ago in South Windsor, 2 workers who died on the job got electrocuted in front of, their coworkers in the dump truck. And again, that's not saying that people are going to be out for the rest of their lives, but to get the help they need to get over that work stress is something we should be doing, because in the long run, it'll save us all a lot of money.
Right, and it'll save us all. Not, it's sort of, in my opinion, it's the right thing to do. It's just one of those very basic things that we want workers back to work. That's what workers' compensation does. It gets workers back to work. We want healthy workers on the job, and we have to take away the stigma of people having post-traumatic stress as a result of an incident. And we've narrowly defined this piece of legislation, and we're not looking for people to be, some people think that people are wimpy when they have a stress-related incident. We have to get away from that and just honor that there are people that have gone through something horrific that no one could ever plan for. And we need to provide them with the protections and take care of acute conditions under the mental health world, or chronic conditions, and get workers back to work very healthy, and honor that that's okay.
Absolutely, and there's no difference. The thing is, we don't have a prosthetic device to help the brain, where people can, hold something in their hands and say, okay, this is what we need to build.
Yes.
And so what you're proposing and what you had the public hearing on, again, it makes sense, and it will save money in the long run, because if you treat it now, it doesn't end up evolving into something much more unmanageable, if you will.
Exactly. And I really think that we're actually in the beginning, in the very infancy of taking care of the brain. I think many of the issues that we have today are like the heart conditions of years ago, where we couldn't take care of the heart, where we couldn't replace hands or fingers, and we can do all of those things now. We've actually provided so many protections for workers on the job. Our machinery is different.
That's right.
So I think that this is just the beginning of something, and we will figure this out, but in the meantime, we're going to provide the protection for men and women who work in Connecticut and get them back to work healthy. and not ignore the fact that they might have a mental health concern. And I'm really excited about it. I'm going to work really hard to get that passed.
And we're going to help you with that, because again, the idea that this is an injury, it just happens to take place, you can't see it.
Right.
And I'll also say that skin is another organ that is not addressed in workers' comp, and we've tried some things in the past and will again in the future. But both of those instances, a person cannot live without a brain and they cannot live without skin, yet they're not part of our workers' comp statutes, and that should be of concern to anybody who goes to work every day.
So lastly, Lori, you and I care deeply about Connecticut workers. We care about jobs, and we've worked together to provide men and women with good, sustainable wages and good jobs in Connecticut. I look forward to working with you as we move the jobs forward in Connecticut, because it's clearly of an interest to both of us to bring good jobs back.
Absolutely, and again, every job is respected. The problem comes when the wages for the job don't allow families to live comfortably here in Connecticut, and we both, I know, strive to do that.
So this is the end of Coffee with Cathy, and Lori and I will continue working for good living wage jobs here in Connecticut and worker protections, and we're every day going to make that our focus.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lori.
Thank you, Senator.